Welcome to CLNS Media's Draft Central coverage. I'm Bobby Krivitsky here with Evan Lazar and Taylor Kyles, and we're going to sort out some of the toughest toss-ups the Patriots figure to run into during the draft. We've already covered who they might go ahead and select if they, in fact, reach for a quarterback in round one. Taylor, if they're more patient, who's the guy that you think makes the most sense for them to select?
We're going from a value perspective, and we know how much the Patriots love value. I got to go Jalen Hurts. Now, the upside, I think, is a little higher than you're going to get with a lot of these mid-tier guys because we saw the development that he had at Oklahoma from Alabama. He improved with his deep accuracy and in the middle of the field, which you like to see from one guy who really had some concerns in terms of his accuracy. But the leadership ability jumps off the board, and that's something I think the Patriots are really going to covet. He's an outstanding locker room presence, especially as a young guy who I think would be an invaluable person to have on the team. He's a true dual threat, and I think he's someone that you could really work in, even if more than just a passer. He's someone who you can legitimately scheme up some run designs for and have him be someone that the defense has to account for, which the way that we see all these mobile quarterbacks in the NFL now, we know how much trouble they've given defenses. Now, he does have some legitimate concerns. I think his decision-making is a little iffy. There are times where he locks onto his first target. And his decision-making, especially I know in the Baylor game, there were times where despite making a fantastic comeback, he had moments where his decisions weren't very good. His ball security wasn't where it needed to be, where it was one hand on the ball and he actually got stripped a couple of times. So there are things you need to work on. But again, if you're getting a guy more day two, you're going to expect him to have some hiccups. But what you're going to get day one is a great locker room guy who's got tools you can immediately work with. So if I'm waiting and I'm going to see a quarterback who maybe I could develop into a solid backup and see what happens, Jalen Hurts is my guy.
Listen, I love Jalen Hurts as a prospect. I really do. I think that he's a great player. I think he's going to be a good player in the league. My biggest concerns with him coming here are a couple of things. One, you're reinventing your entire system if you bring in Jalen Hurts, right? You're going to have to put in a pretty heavy RPO package into your offense. You're going to have to go and play 11 on 11 and use his legs as a way to open up passing lanes to make it easier for him to throw the ball downfield. Because the biggest thing that I see with him, along with missing some open receivers, which you never like to see, is that he's a see it, throw it type of guy. He's not an anticipatory thrower to the middle of the field. So he's not going to necessarily see, okay, I got this zone window opening up. I got the receiver running the dig route. All I got to do is throw it here and then time it out perfectly. He's going to clear the linebacker, that type of thing. He's not going to do that necessarily right away, certainly. And I watch him on tape, and I see just a little bit of hesitancy with his downfield throwing. And I think that that's something that I'm just going to have pause with. And, where is his role going to be with the Patriots exactly? How is he going to be able to translate into what they like to do, systematically? Or are we just going to reinvent the entire wheel and put Hurts into a whole new offense? I would love Jalen Hurts here, but the guy that I think that makes a lot more sense just from a clean, I can see how he translates into their system is Jake Fromm from Georgia. And one thing that I do know about the Patriots scouting with quarterbacks is that they really take into account experience. In 3 years, with 46 starts in the SEC and in the college football playoff against Alabama and all these big-time schools, they're going to take that into account and really consider that as a strength of Jake Fromm's game. Now, he doesn't have the athletic ability, certainly, of Jalen Hurts. He doesn't have the arm that Jalen Hurts has, but he has a little bit of a better feel of how to get through a full field progression, how to stand in the pocket and find, okay, it's this type of coverage. Where's my answer for that? Or what's my answer if that first read isn't open? Where do I go with the football? Jake Fromm's got that ability to read the full field, get through an entire progression, and just facilitate and keep the offense on time. I think that those are the types of things that the Patriots typically look for. And his career trajectory is really similar to Jarrett Stidham's, right? Started out really hot, then got cold. I think the Patriots are going to look at that first couple of years there, especially that first year where he took Georgia to the national championship, and say, if we can get that guy out of Jake Fromm, then we're talking about some serious value where we selected him. So the only other name that we haven't mentioned yet is Jacob Eason. And for the life of me, I can't really figure out what he does well other than have a big arm. So I'm not that upset that we haven't talked about him yet. But the one thing I will say is that he is really at home in a play action system, a system that puts him under center and allows him to take 5 or 7 step drops in play action passing game and then really drive the ball down the field with that big arm. So there's a lot of translation that you can watch him at Washington and see a lot of the play action types of schemes, the play actions with the over routes and all that type of offense. You watch that at Washington and you can see how it fit with the Patriots. But I really think that Fromm is the type of guy, a lot like Stidham, that just kind of checks a lot of those boxes for them in the middle rounds.
you saw him, like you said, the experience, and he's been in a lot of big games, but you also saw him come short in those games, which is what kind of scares me. With so much talent around him, it didn't seem like he elevated it to the level that you might have expected for someone who had so many talented players around him. And then with Hurts, I don't know, maybe I'm getting stuck on the Ryan Mallett comparison, but I'm thinking of a guy who has the physical tools that are really exciting, as someone who McDaniels thinks maybe he can develop, especially considering that we've never really seen what McDaniels is willing to do in terms of if he has a mobile quarterback outside of Brady. Like we saw with Garoppolo, he was more willing to kind of get him outside the pocket, move around a little bit. So I'm curious to see if McDaniels would be willing to incorporate some of these quarterback runs that we're seeing throughout the NFL right now. And just in terms of the ability to win those big games, I think we've seen it with Hurts, but we haven't quite seen it from to the degree that I maybe personally would expect. I'm not sure if that's unfair. So, I mean, I really like from a mentality standpoint, especially in the pocket. I think he definitely has a lot of the things that you would expect from someone who, would maybe be taking over for Brady, or from what we saw from Brady for so long. But when it comes to the physical tools, I think there's a cap there. Again, he's going to be a day two guy, so you're not necessarily expecting him to be a long-time starter. But I think there's a cap there that maybe as a fan, I'm getting a little too carried away with this, but it's not as intriguing as I think someone like Hurts, who has shown some improvement as a passer, although he may not be the best pure passer of the two, but also has some physical tools that you can work with and incorporate into your game plan to help you win on Sundays.
I definitely think that it's more intriguing of a pick. It's a more exciting pick to take Hurts and to see what you can do with him. I know what the translation looks like for Jake Fromm, right? I could already tell you what Jake Fromm is going to look like in the Patriots offense. And I think that with Jalen Hurts, they're going to have to completely reinvent how they do things. So I can't tell you if he's going to be good here or not. Where with Jake Fromm, I know exactly what I'm going to get out of that quarterback and to get out of it in their system. And they don't need a guy necessarily that can throw the ball, 80 yards in the air. They just need a guy that's going to make the right decisions and be careful with the football. And Jake Fromm has been that his entire career, a good decision maker and good with ball security. So I think there's a lot of things that Jalen Hurts has over him that maybe if you were a team like the Baltimore Ravens, for instance, you would want Jalen Hurts 100 out of 100 times over a guy like Jake Fromm. But for the Patriots, again, it's just the simple translation of what do I know I have with him, and do I know that he projects well in my system, or are we changing everything to fit his needs? I think that they would tend to say, well, the system's worked for 20 years. So, yeah, we can make tweaks here and there. We can make it a little bit different to let the next guy succeed because he's not going to be Tom Brady. We know that. So we're going to have to change it just a little bit. But how much do they really want to change it? With that being said, Tim Tebow in Denver was a McDaniels pick. McDaniels, there has been kind of rumors in the past that he's been interested in working with a mobile quarterback, and he sees what teams like the Ravens and teams like the Arizona Cardinals and all these teams that have this 11-on-11 offense, right, where there's somebody in the box at all times that has to account for the quarterback, or the rush has to account for the quarterback the way that they're rushing the QB. I think that McDaniels would like that a little bit. Would Belichick like it? That's a different question.
Free the mad scientist. That's all I'm saying. Let him have some fun.
I just don't think Jalen Hurts is the guy that you go ahead and completely reshape your offense for. There's a reason we're talking about him probably going in the third round of the draft. And when it comes to Fromm, my concern is with respect to his football IQ, I don't think he necessarily made all the talent he had around him in Georgia's offense that much better. I think it was more they carried him as opposed to the other way around. Again, I certainly respect his football IQ and his ability to put guys in the right spot, but I don't think he was the catalyst for that offense, and I don't think anyone sees it that way. And so with Fromm, I just wonder, how much are you really getting? I wouldn't be thrilled about either one, quite frankly. As my starter, you can put Eason in that boat as well. So when it comes time for when those guys are on the clock, I'd rather the Patriots pick at a different position. But I do think Hurts has more upside as a starter between the two, and his mobility both as a runner and when it comes to making throws from outside the pocket, that adds more value to what he can bring as a scout team quarterback.
He's also improved quite a bit in a short period of time at Oklahoma. Whatever quarterback drills they're doing with footwork at Oklahoma and Lincoln Riley, every team in every level of football should be doing. Because they took Hurts from Alabama. His feet were, he was throwing from a narrow base. He was throwing just really messed up footwork from the beginning there at Alabama to now he throws with a sturdy, wide base. And you see the power that he gets from his feet, and then from his legs too, to drive the ball down the field. And those hitch steps that he gets at the top of his drop really convert a lot of that into power to be able to drive the ball down the field. And we saw none of that at Alabama. So he's getting better. He really is. But when I watch him play, I see a little bit of Tyrod Taylor in him where I just don't know if he's ready to pull the trigger. Right, he's just a little bit gun shy at times to force the ball into tight windows down the field and make those kind of NFL throws, if you will. And that worries me a little bit in terms of his ceiling as a quarterback.
And I think, again, if it's not an apples-to-apples comparison by any stretch, but when you think about Lamar Jackson, you're talking about an athletic guy who's probably mostly going to win with his feet early on, who also had a narrow base in college, and it was something that was really concerning that you see him working on at the professional level. So, again, with Jalen Hurts being the backup, I don't think it's going to be necessarily a situation where you immediately need to completely revolutionize your offense. But if you get him there and you work on his mechanics and you see, okay, can he operate in our style of offense the way that we want from a baseline perspective, and then you start to integrate those other things, maybe you start to make it more towards a running style kind of quarterback game plan week to week. I think maybe that's an option. Again, not saying you got to abandon what you've been doing for a while, but if he can show that as a passer he can do most of the things that you want, I think it would be fair to say, okay, let's maybe tailor this more towards his skill set the way that the Ravens did with Lamar Jackson. Again, not an apples-to-apples comparison because I don't want people thinking that I'm saying that they're the same person. They're not. Lamar Jackson's a completely different beast. But Hurts is a very special runner in that he's slippery in the open field. He's tough. He can drive piles with his legs. He knows how to avoid big hits. There's a lot to like there from a mobility standpoint. So I think over time, again, like we said, in terms of upside, I think we're pretty much unanimous that he's the more interesting guy. And then just I think there's that, like I said, that cap that maybe he could be a very good backup, but I don't see him being a consistent NFL starter, even if it is an effective starter in the Patriot system for, a short amount of time if he had to start.
Fromm's got to be the guy that you need to surround him with a great supporting cast. You need to come with it where he has a bunch of good receivers that he can throw the ball to, and all he's got to do is facilitate. Just distribute the ball, make the right decision based off of your progression in the coverage, and just throw the ball where it's supposed to go, and don't try to do too much because he's not the type of guy that's going to create and be this big-time playmaker on his own like a Jalen Hurts is. I have Hurts with a higher grade. I think Hurts is a better player. I just know what I'm getting with Fromm, and right now I'm not 100% sold that I know that with Hurts.
Evan, if they're taking Jalen Hurts with a plan to reshape the offense around him, what does that mean for Jarrett Stidham?
It's a good question. I think that Taylor makes an interesting point that you don't need to do that right away, right? You can let Hurts kind of sit behind Jarrett Stidham for a year or two, let him work out some of the mechanical things that he still has to get to that point, and maybe get a little bit better at anticipating throws and making throws into tighter windows in practice. And then you sort of get into reinventing the entire offense. But I think that if you're going to draft a guy like Hurts, that is some legitimate competition for Jarrett Stidham. We're not talking about James Morgan in round 6 of the draft here where we're just throwing a guy just to have another guy in camp, right? This is a true kind of competition there. So I would be interested to see do they open it up? Right now Stidham Henson starter, right? Whatever that's supposed to mean. So let's see what happens if they actually get one of these guys that we talked about today, a Hurts or a Fromm or even an Eason. What do they do then with Jarrett Stidham is a really interesting question. But I do still think that he will be the most likely to start in 2020. And a big reason why, and I know it stinks that we have to even talk about this, but with the coronavirus, no OTAs, shortened training camp, less practice time, that's a serious consideration that you have to take into account, that they're not going to be able to draft a guy like Jalen Hurts and completely reinvent the wheel in 2020 necessarily. So I think that Stidham is pretty safe in 2020 if it ends up being Hurts.
It's a great point. Stidham certainly starts in pole position. For Evan Lazar and Taylor Kyles, I'm Bobby Krivitsky. For all of our Patriots-related content, including Evan's breakdowns of the best fits for the Pats at each position, check out clnsmedia.com and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Patriots Press Pass.